November 21st, 2025. The Oval Office. On the surface, it is just another political photo op. The 79-year-old President of the United States, Donald Trump, smiling for cameras as he greets New York City's mayor-elect, Zohran Mamdani. But beneath the handshakes and jokes lies a battlefield of a different kind, a battlefield where decisions taken in this room can determine who eats in Gaza and who starves, who lives and who dies. While the president congratulates Mamdani on an incredible race, a besieged strip of land, just 40 kilometers long, is suffocating under bombardment, blockade, and political calculation. Gaza has been under near total closure, borders choked, power cut, fuel rationed, food trickling in under military control. Families live among ruins. Doctors operate with dwindling supplies. Aid convoys wait at crossings, while diplomats argue over wording in distant capitals. Mayor-elect Mamdani, you've accused Israel of committing genocide in Gaza and the United States of funding it. Do you stand by that? I've spoken about the Israeli government committing genocide, and I've spoken about our government funding it. The word genocide shatters the choreography of polite Washington language. Israel rejects the accusation. Trump rejects it. But the claim is spreading from college campuses and protest lines to parliaments and city halls. Here, in this room, it forces a collision between a president pushing for total disarmament of Hamas and a mayor-elect whose voters include people demanding an end to U.S. weapons flows and a radical rethinking of American power. To understand how Gaza became the center of this global confrontation, we have to follow the money and the power. For decades, U.S. military aid has been the backbone of Israel's war machine. Advanced jets, precision munitions, intelligence systems. Successive administrations have framed this as an investment in stability and shared values. At the United Nations, Washington's veto has shielded Israel from sanctions and accountability. Critics call it diplomatic impunity. Supporters call it essential protection for a strategic ally. Behind the scenes, lobbying networks, defense contractors, pro-Israel advocacy groups, think tanks, shape how politicians talk about Israel and Gaza. Campaign donations, talking points, and fact-finding trips all reinforce a system in which Palestinian lives are reduced to collateral damage in someone else's security doctrine. But that system is facing its most serious challenge in years. From London to Jakarta, from Montreal to New York, millions have flooded the streets demanding an end to the siege and the bombing. Lawyers file war crimes, complaints. Human rights groups document strikes on hospitals and refugee camps. Student encampments call for divestment from companies supplying the occupation. In New York, protests spill onto the steps of a synagogue hosting an event promoting immigration to Israel. Chants of "globalize the Intifada" and "death to the IDF" cross lines for many Jewish New Yorkers. Critics see harassment and anti-Semitism. Organizers insist their rage targets a state, not a people. Caught in the middle is Zohran Mamdani, a democratic socialist who rode a wave of pro-Gaza anger to power. He supported Palestinian rights, campus protests, and the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. Yet now he speaks about protecting sacred spaces, condemning intimidation at houses of worship, and rooting out anti-Semitism. It's a tightrope walk between solidarity with Gaza and the fear that criticism of Israel can bleed into attacks on Jews, between moral urgency and political survival. But Gaza's fate isn't only about war, it's about trade, tariffs, and a new kind of nationalism. Donald Trump wielded tariffs like blunt instruments against China, Europe, and even Canada. He called it economic nationalism. Tariffs became punishment and leverage. Raise the cost of foreign steel, threaten auto imports, squeeze rivals until they conceded favorable deals. Supporters saw protection of American workers. Critics warned of global instability. In this worldview, economic tools are weapons, and weapons become bargaining chips. Arms deals with Gulf monarchies, technology agreements with Israel, energy cooperation with regional powers, loyalty rewarded, dissent punished. For Gaza, that means its people are not just trapped by walls and drones, but by spreadsheets and trade flows. by leaders deciding whose suffering is acceptable collateral. On paper, a trade dispute. Beneath it, a brutal logic. When economic ties fray, so do political ones. Mid-sized democracies like Canada must calculate how far they can push before Washington's displeasure has a cost. That calculation extends to foreign policy. How loudly to speak about Gaza, how strongly to criticize Israeli operations, how closely to align with Washington's security agenda. In an era of AI, energy competition, and digital surveillance, the pressure intensifies. Access to technology, intelligence sharing, and security guarantees come with expectations. The question for governments from Ottawa to Berlin to New Delhi is simple and terrifying. How much moral independence can you afford when your economy depends on a superpower? Weeks after the Oval Office meeting, the Gaza crisis reaches a breaking point. Hospitals warn they are days from collapse. Aid agencies speak of looming famine. Leaked documents reveal a new shipment of advanced weapons approved for Israel, even as civilian casualties climb. On the streets, protests grow again. In New York, some praise Mamdani for speaking truth to power. Others demand action. In Toronto and Vancouver, crowds call on Canada to suspend arms exports and back a full ceasefire. Inside the UN, a new resolution emerges: immediate ceasefire, full humanitarian access, and suspension of offensive arms transfers to parties violating international law. The chamber becomes a theater of outrage. Global South representatives demand accountability for decades of impunity. European envoys, pressured by their own streets, try to soften the language without appearing complicit. All eyes turn to the U.S. seat. Will Washington veto again or abstain, allowing a measure it dislikes to pass? The vote begins. For Gaza's civilians, the outcome won't instantly stop the bombing or lift the siege, but it will signal whether the system shielding Israeli power is cracking or doubling down. In the aftermath, headlines declare winners and losers, diplomatic victories, political blows. But in Gaza, victory is measured differently. The number of trucks that enter, the hours of electricity restored, the children who sleep without fear. One thing is clear: the architecture of Gaza's suffering is not confined to a single government. It lives in weapons budgets, trade wars, tariff spreadsheets, and alliances that prioritize stability over justice. It also lives in resistance, in protests, legal efforts, student organizing, and the choices of politicians like Zohran Mamdani. Caught between empire and a besieged population he does not govern but cannot ignore. As the cameras leave the Oval Office and the sound bites fade, Gaza remains on the edge of catastrophe. The U.S. sees itself as indispensable. Israel insists on absolute security. Canada and others balance trade, technology, and conscience. Protest movements insist another world is possible. In this contest between economic nationalism and human rights, between strategic interests and civilian lives, one question lingers. When the next deal is signed, the next tariff imposed, the next arms package approved, whose lives will be counted in the calculations of power, and whose will be written off as the acceptable price of doing politics?